We've reported a number of people have now been terminated. Are more to come?
Well, look, more to come, generally speaking. I think the Department of Justice, we expect our lawyers to act in the right way.
The motto Qui pro domina justita sequitur is engraved on the seal of the Department of Justice. It translates to, who prosecutes on behalf of Lady Justice? Which, as a question, currently raises a poignant concern for the American public.
Your headline out of the White House this morning, President Trump applying new pressure on the Justice Department to prosecute his political opponents.
The president is fulfilling his promise to restore a Department of Justice that demands accountability.
Overall, this is not what I believe the American people expect or deserve from the Department of Justice.
The absolute head of the Department of Justice, the chief law enforcement officer of the federal government, is the Attorney General, a position only few citizens have ever held. Last week, Todd Blanche, former defense attorney of Donald Trump and current acting attorney general after the unceremonious firing of Pam Bondi, sat through a confirmation hearing where senators on the Judiciary Committee scrutinized Blanche on behalf of their own constituents.
By the end of the day on January 20th, they had all been pardoned or commuted. So I wasn't celebrating it. I was merely stating a fact.
As of yet, Blanche has not secured enough votes to become the next Attorney General. However, seeing as it is currently a Republican-controlled Senate, you can expect that he will be confirmed in the upcoming weeks. I, personally, disagree with confirming Todd Blanche. I find him duplicitous, and the mere fact that he is even being considered for the position of Attorney General is a sign of a leaking rot within these United States. The Justice Manual instructs that all legal judgments must be impartial and insulated from political influence. The investigatory and prosecutorial powers awarded exclusively to this executor must be exercised free from partisan consideration. In 1973, after President Nixon fired his Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, and the special counsel that were investigating Watergate, both Congress and the Department of Justice took huge steps to insulate justice itself from partisan considerations. The argument goes that justice must always act in a blind, disinterested manner, in order to never become subordinate to the whim of politics. If that fails, the background design that holds together all legitimate government falls as well. Following Nixon, these procedures and policies that were used to insulate the Department of Justice from partisan politics were followed by every single subsequent president. They sought to avoid the risk of improper motivations and even just the appearance of being improper. The Attorney General may likely be an ally of the president, however, they must never be a servant.
In the legal world, there are fears the DOJ is being stripped of its independence, and while past White Houses have faced criticism over pressure tactics, congressional and inspectors general probes were launched. But that was then.
The DOJ, the Department of Justice, has an ethical obligation to apply the law in a fair and disinterested way. An example being, following Donald Trump firing of FBI Director James Comey in Trump's first term, the Attorney General at the time, Jeff Sessions, recused himself almost automatically. You have to ask yourself, would Todd Blanche recuse himself from cases that he has a political bias towards? Would Trump in his second term even allow that?
Ring alarm bells for some current and former federal prosecutors, as the American president appears to be pursuing an enemies list filled with foes he wants to see charged.
There are no brakes on his emotions and his desires and his determination to do whatever it takes to get revenge on his personal enemies.
Are you and President Trump friends?
I'm his lawyer, was his lawyer.
I have no doubt that Todd Blanche misspoke here, but I do find that these comments, especially with the lack of hesitation, are indicative of a sort of internal mental state.
In a weekend post to his Truth Social account, Donald Trump named political adversaries, claiming them to be, quote, guilty as hell. For Trump's rivals, time might be running out, and for officials unwilling to lay charges, they too could find themselves on the side of a president eager to seek revenge.
For starters, under Blanche, the Justice Department has launched investigations into Trump's political enemies, including former FBI Director James Comey. After Comey posted an admittedly cringe Instagram post where he came across a group of seashells that spelled out 8647, Blanche and Trump both essentially cried out that Comey showed an intent to cause Trump harm.
Tonight, a new indictment and an arrest warrant against former FBI Director James Comey, a fresh attempt to prosecute a figure the president publicly targeted for retribution.
Threatening the life of the President of the United States will never be tolerated by the Department of Justice.
A grand jury has indicted the former FBI director for this Instagram post. I want to put it up. I think a lot of folks have seen it at this point. What led to this indictment?
Yes.
It is worth noting that on Amazon.com, we looked this up, there are dozens of products with the same terminology. We're showing it right here, 8647 being sold and purchased right now. Should individuals selling or buying 8647 merchandise be concerned that they're going to be prosecuted by the DOJ?
This isn't about a single incident. Okay, this isn't. I mean, of course not. That's posted constantly. That phrase is used constantly. There are constantly men and women who choose to make threatening statements against President Trump. Every one of those statements do not result in indictments. Of course, there are facts, there are circumstances, there are investigations that have to take place, and we have charged dozens and dozens of men and women this year with threatening President Trump and others. So this isn't a new charge we're bringing.
This is the second attempt to indict James Comey. Following the previous indictment in September of 2025, all of those previous charges were dismissed, but Trump had already declared James Comey as persona non grata, and Blanche just lapped it all up.
To prosecute someone because of their political beliefs, because they're anti-Trump or may have investigated Trump, that is a problem. That's the whole weaponization of our political justice system that Trump's and other Republicans have really railed against.
The accusation goes that 8647 constituted a threat on Donald Trump's life. But I'll let you be the judge of whether or not James Comey wanted Trump dead, and this was the way by which he was supposed to express the intent to cause harm onto Trump. But I would argue that Blanche himself stakes his reputation on the fact that Comey attempted to commit harm. In another set of huge Blanche corruption blunders, he was the one that wrote a settlement agreement between the IRS as a defendant and Donald Trump, who as a plaintiff was suing the IRS. And in this settlement agreement, first of all, just picture this. Picture the image right now that Donald Trump, the president, is acting as a plaintiff, suing a department that sits under him while that department is being represented by the attorney general he had appointed, who, by the way, had yet to be confirmed, right, is still in his capacity as acting attorney general. Within the settlement agreement, Blanche came out swinging for Trump so hard. Blanche declared that any IRS audits into the president are canceled, and with a stroke of a pen, essentially rendered all of the Trump family immune from prosecution. Okay, so quote, "The United States releases, waives, acquits, and forever discharges each of the plaintiffs from, and is hereby forever barred and precluded from prosecuting or pursuing any and all claims, counterclaims, blah, 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 whether presently known or unknown, that, as of the effective date of the settlement agreement, have been or could have been asserted by the defendants," the United States is the defendant, "against any of the plaintiffs or related or affiliated individuals, including, without limitation, family or others filing jointly," unquote. This includes any subsidiaries or businesses that have even touched the Trump name. Ask yourself, isn't it a huge conflict of interest already that the president can sue a department that sits under him? And is it an even bigger conflict of interest that the president's own appointment can sit as the defense in that case? Like, of course, the settlement agreement was going to come out so one-sided. The mere fact that it was even allowed to begin with is beyond me. With absolutely no care for seeming improper, this settlement agreement was paired with an announcement of a $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund, which would circumvent all proper judicial appeals channels to directly pay Jan 6ers or other Trump goons. The way that the taxpayer money would be divvied out is by some council, some Trump-affiliated council, that would determine where this money needs to go. Thankfully, Blanche assured us that this anti-weaponization fund would no longer be going forward. However, he neglected to put that in writing or as a declaration to the court. And because this anti-weaponization fund is part of the settlement agreement between Trump and the IRS, that at any point in the future, the Department of Justice can pay out any Trump ally in perpetuity. The only reasons that Blanche hadn't gone forward with the anti-weaponization fund is 1, it would put his confirmation hearing in jeopardy, and 2, and Republicans in toss-up districts would also be in jeopardy. But rest assured, when political constraints are no longer a concern, Trump will happily pay out his own goons and allies. To reiterate, the Department of Justice is supposed to carry out the application of law in a fair and even-handed way. Even when indictments really only require probable cause, the Department of Justice only really seeks out indictments where they are confident in achieving a conviction. This is why, prior to Trump, the Department of Justice had a 90% conviction rate for their indictments. The old adage, you can indict a ham sandwich, really only applies to the Trump second term.
Really unethical to find a crime. Prosecutions are supposed to be based on the facts and the law.
Theoretically, you could have always indicted a ham sandwich, but should you indict a ham sandwich? If that sandwich badmouths Trump, Blanche says yes.
The increase in arrests here, we've seen grand juries rejecting charges in some of these cases as well. Our digital investigative reporter, Jordan Fisher, he's been in and out of the courtrooms for these last couple of weeks. And Jordan, we know you reported yesterday that the grand juries, they've rejected, at least 8 of these indictments so far?
Right, 8 so far that we know of.
During Trump's nationwide immigration crackdown, the Department of Justice charged hundreds of people with impeding and assaulting law enforcement officers. Trump himself branded these people as insurrectionists, animals, and thugs. The statute the Department of Justice is using is 18 U.S.C. 111, which was used very sparingly by prosecutors due to the great potential of infringing on a person's rights. The statute makes it a federal crime to assault or impede a law enforcement officer. The only other high-profile use of this statute was during the Jan 6 prosecutions, where only 2 were acquitted out of the 100 or so that were charged. According to the New York Times, the Trump administration has filed assault charges against 558 people. 95 of those cases are still ongoing, 22 have been acquitted, and a whopping 191 have been dismissed. Operation Midway Blitz was a highly publicized ICE engagement into Chicago, where, under the auspices of Trump, masked ICE officers rolled through Chicago without coordinating with local law enforcement.
By the Trump administration, and now it is here. The enhanced immigration enforcement has a name, Operation Midway Blitz.
Homeland Security says they are targeting Chicago and Illinois because people came here knowing Governor Pritzker and his sanctuary policies would protect them and allow them to roam free on American streets. Governor J.B. Pritzker's office responding with a statement that acknowledges they have received no formal communications or information from the Trump administration.
After those actions failed in Chicago, the Trump administration, with the Department of Justice, sought indictments against native Chicagoans who were protesting ICE at the time, detaining members of the public and attempting to charge them with the same obscure federal statute. Of the 62 people charged, 59 of those cases were either abandoned by the federal prosecutor or dismissed by the judges for some pretty serious irregularities.
Attorney dropping a third case, citing serious irregularities centering on a single prosecutor's conduct. Andrew Boutros now pledging to review all of that prosecutor's cases going back decades. The government choosing to dismiss the case rather than having their conduct examined under oath. Charges against those 4 men were dropped today with the judge's approval by Andrew Boutros himself.
And those only include the cases that got past the grand jury.
Spoke about the arson case with grand jurors outside of official proceedings, saying she can prove this case, according to court filings. Going on to say, we don't catch the smart ones. Most of them aren't as smart as they think. Prosecutors are not permitted to speak to grand jury members about a case outside of official proceedings, nor are they allowed to vouch for evidence presented.
Andrew S. Boutros was appointed by the Trump administration as the U.S. Attorney for Northern Illinois after his office failed twice to persuade a grand jury to indict those same Chicagoans. Mr. Boutros directly addressed the grand jury, asking them to identify themselves if they are struggling with these immigration prosecutions. This is highly illegal, and the judge of the case scolded the fuck out of him, saying, "Your sole goal is to do justice, and that trust has been broken." Boutros apologized and immediately dismissed the case. However, Blanche came out swinging for Boutros, praising him of having steadfastly advanced President Trump's mission to make Chicago and Northern Illinois safe for the American people. All this while Blanche reorganized the organized drug enforcement task forces and Project Safe Neighborhoods into exclusively dealing with border control. Another pretty serious stain, not just on Blanche, but the whole Trump administration, were the notorious Epstein file release.
The White House has been facing mounting pressure to release more information about the investigation into Epstein, who the Justice Department concluded died by suicide while awaiting trial in 2019.
When they were all the buzz around D.C., Blanche thought it would be a great opportunity to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell for an interview about Jeffrey Epstein. If you didn't know, it is highly irregular, and some might say irresponsible, for a high-ranking DOJ official to meet with a convicted criminal, especially when that interview is being conducted in the absence of the FBI case agent, detective for the New York police, any prosecutors involved with Maxwell's case. But Blanche claims that this interview was essential, explicitly stating that Maxwell never had the opportunity to speak about her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Of course, if Blanche were familiar with the court proceedings, he would know that Maxwell voluntarily declined to speak at her own trial in 2021. Nonetheless, the interview commenced.
Over 2 days last month, Maxwell spoke with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, who was once one of President Trump's personal lawyers.
You meeting with us today, we're really just meeting. I'm not promising to do anything.
If you remember, Trump was always a little bit squeamish when it came to the Epstein files. He hesitated on committing to their release, stating that good people could get hurt.
You got a lot of people that it could be mentioned in those files that don't deserve to be people, because he knew everybody in Palm Beach.
He made comments about Ghislaine Maxwell, wishing her well. Needless to say, Trump was probably delighted that during Blanche's interview with Maxwell, she had nothing but the nicest things to say about Trump.
Tonight, Ghislaine Maxwell in her own words.
I never witnessed the president in any inappropriate setting in any way.
Describing her interactions with President Trump decades ago.
The president was never inappropriate with anybody. In the times that I was with him, he was a gentleman in all respects.
Did you know of the existence of any such list?
There is no list.
Maxwell's serving 20 years as Epstein's co-conspirator in the sex trafficking of young women, though her attorney says she's innocent.
Nice. He did it. Everything worked out so far. He got it in the bag. But then Maxwell said something that I'm not sure most people really picked up.
If you met Epstein, there is no way that this cast of characters, of which it's extraordinary, some of you in your cabinet, who you value as your co-workers and you know, would be with him if he was a creep or because they wanted sexual favors. A man wants sexual favors, he will find that. They didn't have to come to Epstein for that. Now, okay, I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't see it.
What the fuck? Did Maxwell just say that Epstein couldn't have been that much of a creep because people that Blanche value currently in the Trump cabinet are included in a cast of characters all around Epstein? If you didn't catch that, I don't blame you. It's pretty subtle. So she is saying that someone Blanche sees regularly, who remains unnamed and is part of positions of power, was part of Epstein's cast of cadres. And Blanche decides to follow that up with, when was the last time you saw Epstein get a massage?
So when's the last time you think you were with Mr. Epstein when he got a massage?
A little more than a week following this interview she had with Blanche, Maxwell was moved to a federal prison camp in Bryan, Texas, which is noted as being a federal facility with the lowest level of security in the whole federal system. There, she allegedly received special treatment, receiving custom meals delivered to her, having the company of a companion animal, private exercise, and a whole host of other things. More broadly, with the Epstein files, members within the Trump cabinet and the White House were debating on what to do about the release. Some wanted to just release what they were obligated to in the Transparency Act. Some wanted to release heavily redacted files, citing ongoing litigation. All of them were struggling to kind of find a solution that would leave Trump the least tarnished. Blanche, he had another plan. Instead of complying with the requirements within the Transparency Act, Blanche proposed releasing only the confidential grand jury testimony instead of any investigatory files. This is highly illegal, and Blanche had hoped that a judge would block this release, essentially sweeping the whole Epstein debacle under the rug. If the judge's went against their precedent to allow for the release of the grand jury testimony. There was nothing in there that would connect Trump to Epstein. No one else in the administration agreed with Blanche's cockamamie plan, opting instead for highly redacting and drip-feeding the Epstein files to the public.
Also today, the Justice Department turned over the first batch of its Epstein files to Congress in response to a subpoena.
But Blanche was still hard at work trying to defend President Trump. Allegedly, Blanche worked tirelessly to redact all irrelevant information that was not required to be released by the Transparency Act. For example, Blanche claims that he removed all information regarding a different Epstein in a whole other case. He also pretty clearly redacted names of people that were being investigated as accomplices to Epstein, including Lex Wessner, Leslie Groff, and Jean-Luc Brunel, as well as quite a few mentions of Trump. Sloppily, might I add. As if the Department of Justice really only used the Paint program to apply a black box over top confidential information. The one group Blanche neglected to redact were the victims of Epstein. Some say this was just an error. Blanche even mentions that his staff were overworked and missed a few redactions in that tired stupor. Others suggest that Blanche purposely left in those names to dissuade those victims from seeking restitution for the crimes committed against them.
I'll never forget that meeting. You can imagine, and some are here today, and one will testify a little later before this panel. Try to imagine, if you will, one of these young women saying to me, Jeffrey Epstein abused me when I was 13 years old. 13 years old. Visualize in your own family a daughter, a granddaughter, 13 years of age, who is a victim of this sexual predator. Should she at least have a moment with the Attorney General to tell her story? Is that too much to ask? Apparently it was. This is what I'll tell you. I don't believe a single member of the United States Senate would vote for this nominee after meeting with these survivors. To think that he turned down the opportunity to even meet with them. He went on to say, well, President Trump signed this law, which required us to disclose the Epstein file. The law was necessary because he wouldn't voluntarily disclose them. And now, these women and many more are willing to come forward and say, don't stop with prosecuting two people, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. There are more people you should consider. And yet, the man who would be Attorney General of the United States said he wouldn't meet with them, wouldn't listen to him. That isn't right. That is just plain wrong as far as I'm concerned.
Even if you don't, regardless of what you believe, even if you believe Blanche, even if you believe that Blanche's team faithfully attempted to redact all names, but just happened to run out of ink for the actual survivors of the Epstein crimes, you still have to admit that the handling of the files was so sloppy that no senator in good faith could recommend that Blanche be the next Attorney General. There you have it, all of my reasons that Todd Blanche should be rejected from the position of Attorney General. So far, every Republican senator has voted to confirm Todd Blanche, except two, Senator John Cornyn and Senator Thom Tillis. Both cite the IRS Anti-Weaponization Fund as reasons for the apprehension. And listen, I totally agree, it's totally valid, and I support them attempting to bat away Blanche's more blatant corruption. But the fact that the other Republicans are already committed to voting for Blanche's confirmation without any hangups on his baggage should really leave a feeling of unease inside your gut. The concepts of justice are just not things that should be trifled with. They're the foundations to everything from democracy to filling in potholes. For justice and legitimacy to be squandered for personal aims of the select few is highly problematic. What the fuck was that? Weird, right?